If you have questions or suggestions for future podcasts, please submit them in the comment section below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. The truth shall make you free. Hi, I'm Dave Arnott, the Christian Economist. Lies? Damn lies in economics. That's a rephrasing of the old quip attributed to Mark Twain. It may have been said by Benjamin Disraeli first, but it sounds nice to attribute things to Mark Twain. Now, in the original version, it reads, there are three kinds of lies: lies, damn lies, and statistics. I've just changed it to economics for today. Just a few of the economic mistruths stated by President Biden in his recent State of the Union speech. 1, we created more new jobs in 2 years than any president did in their entire term. Okay, first, the government does not create jobs in the private sector. They could help create them in the public sector, but those are paid for by taxing the private sector. And technically, more people found jobs, but that's because we were on a recovery from the pandemic. The other thing, in economics, we count percentage change, and the percentage is nowhere near the best in presidential history. Here's how the New York Times explains it. Quote, by percentage, Mr. Biden's first 2 years still lagged behind the job growth of his predecessor's full terms. The economy added 8.5% more jobs under Mr. Biden so far, compared to 8.6% in President Barack Obama's first term, 10.5% in President Bill Clinton's first term, 11.2% in President Ronald Reagan's second term, and 12.8% in President Jimmy Carter's 4 years in office. Oh, by the way, if the president is taking credit for creating every new job, is he also taking credit for every job that was destroyed? Number 2, the president mentioned the term fair share again. I've written and spoken about this so many times. It's a clear violation of the 10th commandment, which says, don't covet. Another fact, 57% of Americans pay no income tax. What would be their fair share? How can zero be fair? The president said confidently, by the way, there's 1,000 billionaires and they pay an average of 3% in taxes. Okay. The New York Times points out that the 400 richest families paid 8.2%, almost triple what the president said. And to get to that 3% figure the president quoted, you have to include his income, stocks, and other assets that the wealthy own that they did not sell. So the president is complaining the rich only pay income tax on their income. And that's how the tax code reads. Now, as someone who spent his entire adult life in politics, he's had plenty of time to change those laws if he wanted to. Okay, the third one. The president said we've reduced the national debt. So far, $1.7 trillion in 2 years. He said debt, but what he meant was annual deficit. And there is a big difference. The New York Times again, they point out total debt has actually increased from $27.8 trillion on his inauguration day to about $31.5 trillion as of today. His former boss, Barack Obama, made the same claim some years ago. Annual deficit was bumping along at about $500 billion a year. President Obama doubled it to $1 trillion. Then when it went back to $500 billion, he looked straight into the camera and stated, I cut the annual budget deficit in half. Just after you doubled it. Same thing with President Biden. He doubled it to $3.1 trillion, then cut it about in half to $1.4 trillion. Even CNN corrected the president's error. Goodness, I'm finding all kinds of news sources for citations today. Okay, point number 4. He accused his opponents, saying those who want to use the debt ceiling as leverage to reduce spending are causing chaos and catastrophe. Okay, so being $31 trillion in debt is not chaos? And each man, woman, and child having $94,000 of debt is not a catastrophe? Matter of fact, according to the President of the United States, adding to the $94,000 each person avoids chaos and catastrophe. In the State of the Union speech, he told an emotional story about a 4-year-old who survived kidney cancer. All right, let's connect these dots. He wants the share of debt of that 4-year-old to increase above $94,000. Okay, the 5th lie. The president said of Republicans, They want a 30% sales tax on every single thing, end quote. Factually wrong. Business expenses, food, and many other items would be exempt. And it's pretty simple economic behavior. You should reward what you want, which is income, and punish what you don't want, which is spending. Income tax punishes work and rewards spending. Sales tax rewards work and punishes spending. That's a topic for another day. Okay, point number 6. Counter to Mr. Biden's claim that, quote, we paid for everything, referring again to my favorite news source to cite, the New York Times, they point out that coronavirus stimulus funding added nearly $1.9 trillion to the deficit over 10 years, according to the Congressional Budget Office. The budget agency also estimated that the infrastructure package of Mr. Biden added $256 billion to the deficit. We got time for a 7th one? Sorry for saving inflation for the last, because this one really harms the poor, whom we Christians care about. He bragged that inflation was down to 6.5%. That's from a high of 8.5%, the highest in 40 years. He didn't point out that it was below 2% when he took office, and he blamed inflation on supply chain disruption from the pandemic and the war in Ukraine. Really? So fiscal and monetary policy don't cause inflation? Because I've told my sophomores at Dallas Baptist University that increases in fiscal spending and monetary expansion cause inflation. Here's what bothers me about all this. That was a prepared speech. I would estimate that 50 people, maybe more, have to approve a formal speech of that nature. All 50 of them looked at those 7 statements and agreed that the president should lie to the American people. He could just as easily have said he was 6 feet 2 inches tall. He's not. You see, just like we have objective measures for people's height, we also have objective measures in economics. The truth shall make you free. Okay, that's the title of today's podcast. The assumption of this scripture is that there is one truth. It does not say truths shall make you free. Matter of fact, multiple truths takes away your freedom. And if there's only one truth, then there is freedom. Okay, here's why. Chinese wisdom. I was fascinated by a presentation I attended in Hong Kong titled Chinese Wisdom, with a PowerPoint behind him stating the Noble Eightfold Path of Buddhism: right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right concentration, right mindfulness. The seminar leader stated emphatically, there is no right in Chinese wisdom. Hold it. There were 8 of them on the PowerPoint behind him. Okay, maybe I had just read the book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey, and maybe I was applying seek first to understand, then to be understood. So I took a deep breath that day in Hong Kong, and I listened, and I learned. And here's what I learned, and I wrote it in the book Biblical Economic Policy. I wrote, there are no rights in China because there's no right in China. Okay, you see this? When there are competing truths, the obvious question is, which one wins? Well, that's easy in China. It's the guy with the most power. Okay, I'll make the philosophy part of this podcast short because, frankly, it's not my specialty. The world was full of multiple pagan gods. Everyone had their own. Then the Greeks came up with the idea of reason. Then Jesus came along. You know, the New Testament was written in Greek, right? So Jesus used this reason in many of his arguments. Now, he was an Asian, making what we now would call Western arguments. So you see, in Western thinking, we use reason. If it's A, it can't be B. But in Eastern thinking, there are multiple A's and B's, and they can all be right at the same time. Your own truth. When Oprah Winfrey said on the stage of the Golden Globes, the most valuable thing you have is your own truth, she was using Chinese wisdom. That is, everyone has their own truth. But when Carl Trueman wrote in his book, The Rise and Triumph of the Modern Self, he wrote about expressive individualism. He was criticizing Chinese wisdom. But in Chinese wisdom and expressive individualism, you can't run a communal economy. We have to have agreement on terms like GDP, inflation, spending, taxes, debt, and the value of the dollar. If I say this piece of linen is worth $2 and you say it's worth $1, how do we run an economy? It's either worth 2 or 1. It can't be both. Josh McDowell warned us about this way back in 1994 in his very good book titled Right from Wrong. He was way ahead of his time. He saw the emergence of this multiple truth society, and he warned us about it. Well, as a State of the Union speech recently, it's here. The president declared there are no longer objective truths, there is only your truth. Christian economics. You see, that's why I'm the Christian economist. A Chinese economist would not understand the basis of objective truth. He would pull together a number of philosophies and religions and use the yin-yang to find balance. Oh, some of President Biden's truth, some of President Trump's truth, let's have balance. But when God told Abraham there was only one God, the world changed, and it's not gone back, well, until now, unfortunately. By the way, the context of the statement from Jesus in John 8:32, which reads, "The truth shall make you free," is the discussion about being the descendants of Abraham. See, they were so afraid of accepting Jesus as the truth that at the end of that chapter, they tried to stone Jesus to death and he barely escaped. That's how people respond when you challenge them with objective truth. I'm Dave Arnott, the Christian Economist. Fear God, tell the truth, earn a profit. See you next time. For more information, please visit us online at davearnott.com. If you have questions or suggestions for future podcasts, please submit them online or in the comments section below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.